Before we begin, take a breath. This isn't just a podcast, it's a new way to think, speak, and live in English. Welcome to Confluent Podcast, where words flow, confidence grows, and every sip brings you closer to fluency. So think about, the last time you tried to watch a really fast-paced movie in English. No subtitles.
Oh, yeah. That is always rough.
Right. Or maybe you were in a room with native speakers who are just talking over each other and you feel your brain just entirely freeze up.
Just a total panic response.
Exactly. Just this mild state of panic. And if you felt that, you were definitely not alone. I mean, most of us have been taught to learn a language by, analyzing it like a math equation.
With all the rigid formulas and grammar rules.
Yeah. But today's deep dive is looking at an audio lesson from a pretty prominent English teacher who claims that exact feeling of panic is actually your best friend. Provided you handle it correctly.
Yeah, and we are looking at a really radical departure from the traditional classroom here. Instead of focusing on textbook grammar or memorizing isolated lists of verbs, the audio files we're exploring today advocate for sustained active listening and heavy repetition.
Which sounds intense.
It is. But what makes this particular lesson so fascinating is the vehicle being used to teach the language. The teacher actually utilizes a really high-energy motivational speech by Tony Robbins.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you aren't just figuring out where to place a comma.
Not at all. You're exploring some incredibly deep philosophical territory.
Right, because you're forced to look at the massive gap between merely achieving success on paper, like the metrics, and actually feeling fulfilled in your daily life. It's basically personal development disguised as language acquisition.
That's exactly what it is. And the underlying premise of this methodology starts with the initial shock of exposure.
The panic phase.
Yeah, the panic. When you throw yourself into the deep end of native, unedited speech, like a rapid-fire clip of Tony Robbins just pacing a stage, your brain is going to get overwhelmed.
Naturally.
The audio explains that when students first listen to this advanced material, they might only understand 50 or maybe 60% of what is being said.
Which, for someone who has spent years studying textbooks, hitting that 50% wall feels terrible.
Oh, completely.
You just feel like you failed or like you've wasted all your time.
It is a massive blow to the ego.
Yeah.
But the teacher argues that this initial shock is biologically normal. Your auditory processing is just totally overloaded by the speed, the slang, and all those blended words.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do people usually do?
Well, the traditional instinct is to retreat. You pause the audio, you pull out flashcards, and you go right back to safe, controlled grammar drills.
Right, the comfortable stuff.
Exactly. But the solution presented here is to actually lean into the discomfort, to do sustained, active listening to the exact same audio over multiple consecutive days.
Okay, so I kept thinking of an analogy while going through these notes.
Let's hear it.
It's almost like walking from a bright street into a pitch black room. At first, you can't see a single thing, right? And your heart rate spikes.
You might panic a little, yeah.
Yeah, but if you just stay in the dark room, your pupils dilate. Your eyes naturally adjust, and slowly the blurry shapes kind of turn into furniture.
That's a great way to put it.
You don't have to consciously force your eyes to see better. You just have to give your biology time to adjust to the environment. You just have to stay in the room.
That analogy perfectly captures the cognitive mechanism at play here. And think about what a beginner usually does in that dark room. They panic and try to turn on a flashlight.
Oh, which ruins everything.
Right. And in language learning, that flashlight is pausing the audio to look up a word in a native language dictionary.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, the second you turn on that flashlight, you completely ruin your brain's night vision. You stop the natural adjustment process. You have to stay in the dark to let the brain adapt to the flow.
That's fascinating. Let's map out that adjustment process because the timeline presented in the audio is really interesting.
Sure. So on day one of listening to the advanced clip, you might only grasp the basic emotional tone.
Just the big blurry shapes in the room.
Exactly. But by day three, having listened repeatedly and, perhaps reading along with a transcript once or twice, specific phrases begin to separate themselves from that wall of sound.
So the brain is basically starting to recognize patterns.
Yes, it is chunking the information. And by day 14, after consistently engaging with the exact same audio every day, the learner experiences this massive leap.
Like a real breakthrough.
Huge.
Hmm.
They go from that stressful 50% comprehension to a very relaxed 90 or 95%.
Wait, really? Just from repeating the audio, why does that happen on a neurological level? Because, I mean, sitting in a room listening to sounds seems, I don't know, almost too passive to create such a dramatic jump in long-term fluency.
Well, it comes down to eliminating the middleman. See, when you study textbooks, you train your brain to act as a translator.
Right, the whole mental gymnastics routine.
Exactly. You hear an English word, your brain pauses to translate it into your native language, you access the meaning, you think of a grammar rule to formulate a response, and then you translate it back into English.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. That multi-step process takes milliseconds, but in a real-time conversation, those milliseconds add up to awkward pauses and just total exhaustion.
And that's why speaking feels so stressful for so many learners. It's way too much cognitive load. You're basically running 3 software programs at once just to say hello.
Exactly. So by repeatedly listening to the same audio, you force the brain to abandon that translation software entirely.
Because it's just too fast.
Right. It's too fast to translate, so the brain just starts linking the sound directly to the concept. It moves you from intense cognitive stress to relaxed confidence, where the English words just hold meaning on their own.
Okay, I buy the darkroom analogy for getting used to the speed and rhythm of native speech. But I have to ask, if I just sit in a dark room long enough, I might eventually see the shape of a chair, but the room itself isn't going to magically teach me the English word for chair, right?
That's a fair point.
So how do these sounds actually turn into specific meaning without relying on a dictionary?
This is where the specific design of the lessons comes into play. The methodology hinges entirely on vocabulary repetition and learning words through contextual anchors.
Contextual anchors, meaning no dictionary definition.
Right. The teacher deliberately avoids giving students standard dictionary definitions. Instead, words are defined by how they function inside the story or the speech itself.
Okay, give me an example of how that works in practice.
So take the word metrics from the Tony Robbins clip. A dictionary might give a dry explanation about, quantitative assessment.
Which puts you right to sleep.
Exactly. But in the audio, the teacher defines metrics as the specific measurements you use to judge success in your own life.
Like stepping on a scale to track your physical fitness or checking your bank account to track your income.
Precisely. It's grounded in real life. Or take the verb to manifest. Instead of some esoteric definition, it's grounded in the context of the speech as taking a vision from your imagination and forcing it into reality.
The physical world.
Yes. And they do the exact same thing with idioms. The audio explores the phrase to rub off on someone.
Right, which can be really confusing for a learner.
Very. But it's explained as passively influencing someone just by being in their proximity.
Wow.
Like getting paint on your jacket because you leaned against a wet wall.
Oh, I like that. The meaning is baked into a visual and emotional context.
Exactly. It's not just an abstract concept anymore.
But it's not all high-level Tony Robbins philosophy, is it? I mean, the notes mention the teacher also uses some frankly bizarre mini-stories to teach vocabulary. There's a specific reference to a very silly story about a tortoise and a chihuahua.
Yeah, the contrast there is very intentional. See, the brain discards boring data. If you stare at a blank flashcard with the vocabulary word, your brain has absolutely no reason to retain it.
Right, it's just ink on paper.
But if that word is embedded in a profound, emotionally charged speech about your life's purpose, or alternatively, wrapped inside a completely absurd narrative about a chihuahua.
The brain tags that information as important because of the novelty.
The novelty and the emotion. Hearing the same vocabulary words over and over inside these highly engaging contexts is what bridges the massive gap between passive knowledge and active knowledge.
Let's clarify that difference for the listener, actually, because I think a lot of people get stuck there. Passive knowledge is when you are reading a book or watching a show and you recognize a word. You know what it means.
Right.
But active knowledge is when you are in a conversation, under pressure, and that word effortlessly drops out of your mouth without you searching for it.
Yes, and transforming passive into active requires deep neurological pathways, which, honestly, are only built through heavy repetition.
I have to push back on this, though.
Okay, go for it.
Listening to the exact same Tony Robbins clip or the exact same story about a tortoise and a chihuahua every single day for 14 days, I feel like the average learner would lose their mind from boredom. Doesn't this level of repetition just become a chore?
It would absolutely become a chore if it were mindless rote memorization.
Like conjugating verbs.
Right, if you were repeating a list of conjugations for 2 weeks, your brain would tune it out by day 3. But the repetition works here because the material itself commands your attention.
How so?
You are basically peeling back layers of an onion. On day 1, you're just struggling to hear the words.
Okay.
By day 5, you're understanding the phrases.
And by day 10?
By day 10, you aren't even thinking about the English language anymore. You are actively arguing with Tony Robbins in your head about your own life choices.
That makes total sense. The language just becomes a transparent vehicle for the ideas.
Exactly.
So let's actually dive into the ideas that make this specific audio so gripping. What is the teacher using Tony Robbins to communicate?
The core of the lesson breaks down what makes a great life, and it divides it into 2 distinct arenas: the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment.
Okay, let's tackle the science of achievement first. The audio frames this as a very specific skill set, right? It's the mechanics of manifesting a vision.
Yeah, and it's called a science for a reason. Sciences have rules, predictable formulas, and measurable outcomes.
So if you want to achieve something in the physical world, you don't have to guess.
Right. The audio discusses this concept of modeling, finding someone who is already highly successful at what you want to do, and simply replicating their actions to bypass a decade of trial and error.
And it's highly measurable using those metrics we discussed earlier. You can measure your bank account, your profit margins, the square footage of your house.
Exactly. But the audio highlights a massive, glaring trap in this pursuit.
Oh, the phone calls. Yeah, Tony Robbins mentions receiving phone calls from some of the most objectively successful people on the planet. We are talking multi-billionaires who reach out for business advice.
Yeah, and once he sits down with them, he discovers a dark secret.
That they are, in his words, miserable as hell.
It is the ultimate paradox. These individuals have completely mastered the science of achievement. They followed the formulas, acquired the wealth, hit all their metrics.
But they utterly failed at the second part of the equation, fulfillment.
Exactly, because fulfillment isn't a science.
The audio describes it as an art. To me, it sounds like the science of achievement is essentially baking a cake from a complex recipe. If you follow the exact steps, dial in the oven temperature, measure the ingredients perfectly, you're guaranteed to get a cake at the end.
Right, you get the cake.
But the art of fulfillment is your actual biological ability to taste and enjoy that cake. You can spend your entire life baking the most magnificent multi-tiered cake in the world, but if your taste buds are completely numb, the cake is totally useless to you.
I love that framing. And the tragedy outlined in the audio is how many people spend their entire lives frantically baking massive cakes, terrified that someone else has a bigger cake.
Right.
And they never once learn how to sit down and actually taste a single slice.
That is so true. But bringing this back to the language learner, why use this specific existential crisis to teach English? Why not just use standard business dialogues or travel conversations?
Because of the effective filter. When a learner listens to dialogues about booking a hotel room, they know they are studying. Their guard is up. They're stressing about syntax and grammar.
They're in student mode.
Exactly. But when a learner is listening to this audio, they are prompted into deep internal reflection. You, as the listener, can't help but evaluate your own life.
You start questioning if your daily stress is just a pursuit of a metric or if you are actually fulfilled.
Right, and in doing so, you completely forget you were supposed to be translating.
Precisely. Your brain is so wrapped up in processing these profound personal realizations that the English language completely bypasses your conscious filter. It stops being an academic subject to conquer and becomes a tool for self-discovery.
Which perfectly explains why the active listening method finally clicks. The medium just sinks into your subconscious because you are so focused on the message.
But to truly understand this art of fulfillment, the audio takes us into somewhat darker territory.
It does.
We have to look at what actively blocks our ability to taste the cake. This brings us to a deep dive into the specific vocabulary of suffering.
Yeah, the teacher devotes a significant portion of the lesson to meticulously breaking down the difference between the word pain and the word suffering.
In casual conversation, we tend to use those words interchangeably.
We do, but the audio argues they are fundamentally different experiences.
To define the vocabulary, the teacher gives a very visceral, physical example from his own life.
Right, the jujitsu story.
Yeah, he describes a jiu-jitsu sparring session where things went wrong and he accidentally got smashed right in the mouth by another guy's head. Just a brutal, sudden impact.
And he is very clear that getting hit in the mouth absolutely caused physical pain. His lip was bleeding, his nerves were firing, But he emphasizes a crucial point.
He did not suffer.
Exactly, because he didn't attach a miserable narrative to the physical sensation.
It was just an impact.
The pain was an unavoidable biological reality of stepping onto the mat. Suffering, on the other hand, is an entirely constructed mental state.
Interesting.
According to the lesson, suffering only occurs when we begin to obsess over ourselves. The audio affectionately refers to this as playing the me, me, me game.
The me, me, me game. We all play it, whether we want to admit it or not. But what does that actually look like in practice?
It is that relentless, looping internal monologue of worry and entitlement. It's obsessing over what we are getting, what we are unfairly not getting, what we should have said yesterday, or what other people should have done to accommodate us.
It is a complete inward collapse of focus.
Perfectly said.
Let me ask you a genuinely probing question here, because this borders on toxic positivity if we aren't careful. If suffering is just a selfish obsession with this me game, does the audio suggest we are supposed to just ignore our genuine pain to achieve this extraordinary, fulfilled life? Like, do we just plaster a smile on our face and pretend we aren't hurt when a tragedy happens?
That is a critical distinction, and the teacher specifically addresses the danger of ignoring reality. It was absolutely not about pretending pain doesn't exist.
Okay.
Pain is an inevitable part of the human experience. The audio even touches on profound emotional pain, like the grief of a personal loss. You are going to feel pain, and you are supposed to feel it.
So if we can't avoid the pain, how do we stop the suffering?
The intervention happens in the gap between the pain and the narrative. The solution is about deciding to kill the subsequent suffering before it builds momentum.
How does the audio describe that?
It uses this incredibly vivid imagery of catching the suffering the moment it starts creeping into your mind and deciding to kill it like a dead bug.
Just squish it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You acknowledge the physical or emotional pain, but you actively, fiercely choose to pivot your focus.
You have to direct the spotlight somewhere else. But where?
Outward. Toward gratitude rather than inward toward self-pity.
That's a huge shift.
It is. And the fascinating psychological claim made in the source material is that the human brain simply cannot hold on to deep, genuine gratitude and the suffering of the me game at the exact same moment.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they occupy the same cognitive bandwidth. If you forcefully direct your focus toward the blessings in your life, the suffering is literally crowded out.
The audio also mentions some physical practices to help enforce this, right? Because just telling someone to be grateful when they are visibly upset is usually a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. It requires an anchor. The teacher recommends practices like walking mantra meditation.
Walking meditation, how does that work?
Well, when your mind is trapped in that negative loop, you physically move your body while chanting a phrase or focusing on a specific thought. The physical movement, combined with the vocalization, acts as a circuit breaker for that internal narrative.
That makes total sense. It physically interrupts the mental spiral. You know, wrapping all of this up, the journey we've mapped out today is really remarkable for anyone trying to acquire a new skill.
It really is.
We started by looking at the sheer panic of stepping into the dark room of advanced English. But we saw how pushing through that initial 50% comprehension hurdle by using sustained active listening and encountering vocabulary repeatedly in engaging contexts, it basically bypasses the exhausting translation process entirely.
Yeah, it rewires the brain to process the language natively, shifting the learner from stressful memorization to effortless retrieval.
But the real magic isn't just in the mechanics of the language acquisition. It's the realization that by engaging with complex, challenging content, like a Tony Robbins seminar on the nature of success, the learner is absorbing life-altering concepts.
They're getting a lot more than just English lessons.
Exactly. They aren't just memorizing the definition of the word suffering. They are learning how to separate inevitable pain from the choice of suffering. They are learning the crucial difference between checking off the metrics of achievement and actually cultivating an artful, fulfilling life.
And perhaps that is the ultimate takeaway for you, listening right now.
Yeah. What should they walk away with?
The next time you set out to learn something extraordinarily difficult, whether that is a foreign language, a complex physical discipline, or just the daily practice of figuring out how to be happy, ask yourself a fundamental question.
Which is?
Are you just trying to achieve a metric of success so you can show it off? Or are you meticulously designing a process that fulfills you every step of the way? Because if the billionaires with all the money in the world are miserable, maybe the real fluency we all need to practice daily is the language of gratitude.